First of all, I don't know which one's brighter, this light mine or it hitting my head and coming back at you. So, but I appreciate y'all being here tonight. Any crowd's a great crowd. I really appreciate seeing the youth here. Mary, I appreciate you bringing the cheerleaders and everybody. And I don't want to start naming people because the last thing I want to do is leave somebody out. I'm going to let Miss Christie mess up and do that. So I want to welcome the parents and the staff, and we've got an outstanding group of distinguished people right here that I'm sure can answer about any questions, and the ability and the expertise sitting at this is unbelievable, and I appreciate it from my role as director of schools. Hi, I'm Barry Smith, director of schools. I think everybody here, maybe these guys don't know me, but everybody else. I want a special thanks to Christy Glover. She's the one who made this happen. Christy's worked on this for months. Kobe with the Insider, I've had several people because we've got 2 district tournaments going on right now. I know in baseball and probably 4 counting softball. It's a beautiful day, but I've had a lot of people told me they can't wait to watch it tonight. As a parent, like I was telling Mr. Beller, I have questions. I want to know, I've got a 16-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I have some questions. I want to know the liability for my son and the liability as a parent, and I think that's very important. I want to take the opportunity to think I see every school in our district represented. It wasn't mandated, but I asked them, I told them I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys being here. I've got Randy with Glover with the board, and I appreciate him, our school attorney, just seeing a few people and faces. The biggest thing I tell people, and it's going to be a little bit of an arrogant statement, but I mean it, you can drive 15 minutes in either direction and you don't have what you got in Smith County. And the reason for that is because we've got great law enforcement. We really do. We've got a great judicial system. And you know, I've got a Mike Dunn. I can pick the phone up and I consider a personal friend, a good Christian man. I'm not afraid to say he's a godly man, and there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. I'm a godly man. I need to be a lot more godly than I am. I need to get fired for that line up. But I do want you to know this. It takes all of the spurs in the wheel, so to speak, or the spikes, to make it work. And we work together. We've got a great school system because I've got great people and I've got great support. And I appreciate you guys more than you know. We don't get paid, or they don't get paid for sure anymore to being here tonight. And they're here because they care. So is these guys right here. This was started several months ago. It wasn't anything that led into it. We just felt like the need. We felt like going forward. I was talking to Mr. Beller and Kit Jenkins, that's a teacher for us right now, and I was talking to Christy. We think going forward there's a lot of things we can do positive with this, and maybe even change the dates and the timing, whatever works best. But we're excited about the first one of these, and maybe it can lead into something really good. And I want to say a special thank you to everybody at the table if I won't get a chance to do that. Thank you guys. Thank you for being here. This time, Christy, I'm going to let you come up and introduce people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to get started with our first guest speaker. He was the one that I talked to first about starting this event. So thank you, General Lawson. He was all on board. Jason Lawson is the district attorney for the 15th Judicial District, which includes Jackson, Macon, Smith, Trousdale, and Wilson counties. He was appointed by Governor Bill Lee on April 7, 2021, upon the retirement of long-term District Attorney General Tommy Thompson. And he's currently running unopposed for re-election. A native of Watertown, Tennessee, and has been a resident of Mount Juliet, Tennessee for 18 years. Jason graduated Watertown High School in 1995 and attended Middle Tennessee State University, where he graduated in the spring of 1999. His senior year, Jason was elected as student body president. Jason attended the University of Tennessee, Knoxville College of Law, and graduated in 2002. After graduation, Jason joined the district attorney's office for the 15th Judicial District in November of 2002. During his time at the district attorney's office, Jason has been responsible for prosecuting thousands of criminal cases across the 5-county district. Jason has tried jury trials on the most serious felonies in all 5 counties of the district. These jury trials include the prosecution of a serial killer, multiple double homicide cases, many homicide cases, child abuse, felony deaths, sex crimes, major drug conspiracies, white-collar crimes such as extortion, and other serious felony offenses. Jason is married to his wife, Christy, of 18 years, and they're raising 2 sons. He is active in his church where he serves as a youth director and is involved in several other community organizations, such as youth sports in the Mount Juliet area. You all help me welcome Mr. General Lawson.
All right, thank you so much. And I want to start by echoing the comments that I heard just a few moments ago. You know, we're here tonight because we care. We see a lot that's facing our young people today. We see a lot of opportunities, a lot of pitfalls, a lot of dangerous situations. In the professions that me and these other gentlemen work in that you're going to hear from tonight, we do see people who make mistakes, and sometimes they're unavoidable mistakes. And we want to be here tonight to kind of share with you a little bit about what we're seeing and hopefully save someone from kind of following in some of those footsteps. We're here because we care. And I'll start by telling you, I've actually kind of put my notes up here. I'm going to kind of follow them loosely, so there's probably more text on the screen than you're used to. It's not a big flashy PowerPoint presentation. It really is my notes, so just bear with me as we go through that. But I'll start by telling you that the first thing, and we all know this, social media is not a bad thing. There is a lot of things that are very positive about social media. It lets us connect with people we haven't seen in a long time. It helps us to keep track of people. It helps us share photos and things like that with family members who maybe live in different states. There's a lot of positive things out there. But to me, it's kind of like any other tool. A tool can be used for a great way, or a tool can be misused. And sometimes when you misuse a tool, it can have some very dangerous consequences. I'm going to cover probably a lot of ground tonight. I'm going to talk about the different things that we're seeing with respect to social media and apps. I'm going to talk about some of the laws that are out there, about how we do some of the investigations that were out there. And most of all, I'm going to talk about some of the danger areas that we're seeing some of our young people fall into. So a lot of ground to cover, and I'm going to kind of jump right into some of these things. You know, as this is a necessary discussion, in my opinion, because we're seeing more and more of this, and sometimes a lot of the things that we see are not necessarily things that you would instantly think of. You know, school fights that we're seeing in juvenile court, some of that's coming from cyberbullying, and you wouldn't maybe necessarily make that connection. We see a lot of teen depression, and some of that comes from watching what other people are doing on Facebook, or the way that someone else looks on Facebook, or the way that they're acting. And because of those things, people get depressed because they say, well, that's not my life. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight as well. False threats that may lead to criminal prosecution. We're going to talk about that when someone threatens a shooting at a school, or a bomb threat, or things like that. Oversharing information that can absolutely lead to identity theft, and also opportunities for burglary and robbery and things like that. And there's many other topics that we're going to kind of cover ground. You know, for a guy like me, the first thing that I think of, and really the only thing I think of when I think of social media, is Facebook. I mean, that's the only one I do. That's the only one I really know. But unfortunately, that is a very naive way of looking at things, because for our kids today, social media covers so much more than just Facebook. Social networking is kind of my idea of the basic form of social media that we have, and that is Facebook. But really the next thing that evolved was blogging. People would get on and they would basically keep on online journals and write these blogs. Well, that kind of turned into something known as microblogging, and that's what we call Twitter. There are a couple of other social media apps that do that, Tumblr and Medium, but people want to put very short statements about the things that they're thinking about. Now, where this can turn into a bad situation is people start to think, well, the more outrageous a statement I make, the more people are going to like my statement or follow my statement or things like that. However, outrageous statements typically backfire on people, and that can really start generating a negative situation. And so it's really not about making the outrageous statements, because those things can be dangerous. You've got to be careful what you say that goes out there. And we see that all the time in our news networks. Of course, words isn't enough. And so after words, you know, then comes pictures and videos that we see on social media. And some of the most prevalent ones that we see out there is Instagram and Snapchat, where you can share visuals, and often, and notice this word, in a false belief of privacy. Because those things are not as private as you think that they are. We're going to talk about that. In addition, though, to Instagram and Snapchat and these ways to share visuals, you also see YouTube and TikTok. TikTok has really made a strong come on in the past couple of years. And that is a mass communication of videos that's out there. So these are some of the common social media apps that we see. There's also really an evolution of texting. You know, in my generation, when I grew up, texting was just texting. You got on your phone, you sent someone a text message. But then the very next step that happened was Facebook Messenger. And everyone started texting through Facebook Messenger. Well, now other apps have entered the market to really give Facebook Messenger a challenge themselves. The one that's probably the most popular is something called WhatsApp. But there's also Kik, there's some other ones, and those are direct communication applications that are out there. We also have seen the evolution really in the internet of something called chat rooms. Chat rooms begin when a group of people can enter a room and have a conversation that other people in the room can see this conversation. Now we see social media apps that are out there such as Reddit that's out there doing the same thing. But the conversation became really extremely dangerous when some of these chat rooms started offering anonymity, saying that, well, you can post something and no one will know who is posting what. The most famous one of those is something called Yik Yak. Dangerous concept because people think, well, I can put whatever I want out there and nobody's going to know who said this. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And I'll just tell you this, if you want to test me on this, anybody who has this Yik Yak, you can go to the bottom of that page and you'll see a couple of words there that you should pay attention to. And those words are law enforcement. Because if you click on that link, it shows you the form that law enforcement needs to fill out to find out who it is that posted that. And so they're not quite as private as people think that they are. Oftentimes, the abuse that we have seen from Yik Yak is people doing public shaming and cyberbullying and things like that. And people, if they're not giving their name, they are emboldened to say even worse things that really they would probably never say to somebody who's face to face. And so if you wouldn't say it in the presence of other people, if you wouldn't say it to someone face to face, certainly don't put it out in some anonymous forum, because when that backfires and when it is that law enforcement's called in, it's going to be easy to find out. And we're going to talk about how some of that is done here in investigations here in just a moment. We also see, unfortunately, some teenagers more and more are enrolling in dating apps. And there are some dating apps that are out there actually that will let people as young as 13 years old join those dating apps. And that is just a breeding ground for a sexual predator online. He knows he's got a young person looking for a relationship, and really anyone who gets on those ought to be very suspect of anyone they meet on there, because they're oftentimes falsely representing who they are and what their intentions are and things of that nature. So these are a couple of the dating apps that are out there that are very dangerous also. We also have seen now, video games are not the same as when I was growing up, right? And I'm not talking about the Atari stick. I was in the Nintendo generation, so a little bit more modern than that. But now the games, and even the ones that my teens at home play, they have the headsets, and the headsets have the microphone, and they're online and they're talking to their friends. Well, this can be a very dangerous situation if you don't know who they're talking to on the other side, because what we have seen happen is sometimes these teens will meet people through some of these other apps that I've already talked about, and before long they're asking, well, what is your Xbox handle? If I were to get on Xbox and want to game with you, who do I look for? And so now they're having verbal conversations with someone who really is a complete stranger. And the questions that they ask seem innocent enough. They're questions like, oh yeah, well, where do you go to school? Oh yeah? Hey, are you on Snapchat? Hey, let's be friends. Why don't you send me a pic? And before long, this person starts to groom a young person to try to abuse them in some fashion illegally. So be careful about the online gaming. That is another area where we're seeing more and more people who are reaching out and abusing those systems that seem to be innocent in their creation. This makes it more important than ever for parents to protect their teens. Social media is oftentimes being used by people committing crimes. Now, what is the most prevalent? A recent study shown that this was the order of teens on these social media apps. And that would be surprising to me. Who would know that Instagram would be number one? But Instagram is number one. Facebook is number 2. Snapchat is number 3. I would argue that it's outdated. I think TikTok has now made it to number 4. But these are what a lot of young people are on. So if the parents are looking at your child's phone and you see these apps on there, know that that is a social media app. And if it's something that you're not aware of, please become aware of what's going on with that and why they're using that app and what they're doing with it. So let's talk about some of the dangers. There are some dangers that actually are not criminal dangers. And although I'm a prosecutor, and that's what I do professionally, and I'm going to be talking about the criminal law, there are things out there that just bother me as a person. One thing is that social media is extremely addictive. There are some studies that say that a lot of teens will spend as much as 1/3 of their day on social media. Now, anytime you fill up your day with something like that, what you're basically doing is taking other activities that you would be doing and pushing those things out of the way to make room for the social media. So we see distractions. We see people who are not doing interpersonal activities like sports or church or other things where they can make good relationships with people. We see schoolwork suffer a lot of times because they're distracted and not doing their schoolwork like they should. We see jobs and employment situations suffer like that. We also see a lot of teens who will be on social media late at night and actually cause themselves a voluntary sleep deprivation from staying up so late and talking to all of their friends on social media. And because of that, their performance and also their health can even suffer. Most of you probably know teenagers do most of their growing when they're asleep. So anyway, sleep deprivation, these are not even criminal aspects, but these are some of the negative effects that we are seeing from social media. There's also things that I mentioned a moment ago, teens kind of comparing their lives to the lives of their classmates. And this isn't on the slide, but I will tell you, once upon a time, I saw this t-shirt that I thought was just so telling on this point. And it said, you know, my wish is that your life is as awesome as you pretend it is on social media. Because everybody puts out all this great stuff about their lives on social media, and it's not a real picture. Everybody, every human being has challenges. Every human being has problems. They put the great stuff out there. They don't put any of the negative stuff out there. But from someone on the outside looking in, they say, wow, I wish I could be that person. I wish I could look like that person. I wish I could. And these lead to negative attitudes by a lot of young people. Sometimes we've seen eating disorders that have developed. We've seen anxiety. We've seen depression. We've seen this comparison. And oftentimes there's a feeling of isolation because they don't feel like they're included in the same activities that some of their peers are. And so all of these type of behaviors and attitudes that start to develop from comparing one person's life to another's on what they're seeing on social media, which isn't the real picture, can really develop into some negative behaviors for teens. So we've got to be careful to kind of monitor them and see if we are seeing any problems that are developing from this. Other things that we see that's a real problem is things like oversharing. And this could be as simple as this. Next week I'm going on vacation and I'm going to the Bahamas. Well, guess what? If there is a thief or a burglar out there, they now know when your property is not going to be protected. So you can share too much information and really make yourself a target for things. I have family members that can't go to dinner every night without posting on there where they're eating dinner at. And I'm thinking, well, if people are going to pick up on this pattern, and you are really opening yourself up to let people know when you're not home. So you've got to be careful about the information you're sharing. As innocent as that may seem, you could actually be setting yourself up to be a victim if the wrong person is looking at that. Cyberbullying. Cyberbullying, it's the use of social media to communicate false, embarrassing, or hostile information to specific users. It's similar to traditional bullying, but what makes cyberbullying so much worse is that in the old days, if a person was being bullied, 3 o'clock came, they would get on the school bus, they would go home, and that day is over. The social media aspect of cyberbullying causes the bullying to follow them, and there really never is a break for the kid. And so they're continually having to live in this cycle where we're facing this all of the time. These kids have been developing some of these same negative behaviors that I've talked to. And one of the things that I would share with anybody who is being social media cyberbullied is it's so easy to screenshot those conversations, to preserve that evidence, to show it to an adult, to show it to someone who can help you with this. And the most important thing I would say is this, is that, for me, one of the vast lessons that I learned in my life is that a lot of my relationships, especially my younger relationships, were temporary relationships. I don't see the people that I went to high school with anymore, hardly ever. I don't even see the people that I went to college. But every step that I took in my life, whether it was high school, whether it was college, whether it was the workplace, I made a new set of friends, and there was a new group of people. And the more I became involved, whether it was church activities or a community group, I would make a new set of friends and a new group of people. And so really friendships and these feelings of isolation, those are temporary things that a lot of our teens are dealing with. I hope they can learn to view those as temporary things because the next step of their life is going to be a completely different world for them. And then the next step after that will be a completely different world for them. And our lives are constantly evolving and constantly changing. So although they may feel this isolation now, realize that's a temporary situation. But preserve that evidence, because that evidence of someone stalking and cyberbullying, that can actually be used by criminal prosecutors to prosecute someone for the crimes of harassment or the crimes of stalking. You don't think about that, but continual harassment does actually meet those criminal statutes. I also, unfortunately, occasionally will see people who don't really appreciate real risk. And we've all seen these things that have come on the internet about the challenges. This is the latest challenge. We want you to do this challenge. Well, a lot of those challenges are really destructive to young people because they're dangerous. Kids will try to do something and then they'll suffer some terrible, terrible consequences. It could be from them trying the latest, greatest challenge that everybody is talking about, which, have some sense and stay away from those things. Or it could even be from somebody saying, you know what, I just have decided I want to be internet famous and make some kind of viral video. And then they choose to do something really, really dumb that is dangerous and could have lasting impacts on their life forever. So, it's not worth it on any of those things. You've got to appreciate the risk of the things that are going on. Identity theft is another danger that we see from social media. So many times people who are on any online environment, including social media, they're soliciting things like your name, your date of birth, your social security number, your card number, your PIN number, your phone number, all of these things. Well, how do identity thieves use this information when they get it? How many of you all get junk mail? And when we get junk mail, we open that, and here is an application from a credit card company saying, fill this out and send it in. Except instead of writing their own information, they're now writing your information. And now they have a credit card issued in a name that they're going to go out and spend and blow your credit rating and things like that. So we've got to be on guard with the way that we're sharing our information online, because if it's not carefully being protected, it can certainly be abused by anyone who gets their hands on that information. Cyber stalking, that is someone who continually becomes obsessed with another person. It begins oftentimes by tracking people online and through social media apps. Where it becomes really dangerous is when that person decides, hey, I know because I'm stalking this person every day where they go to school and where they go to cheerleading practice and where they do this, and I think I'm just going to show up down there. Well, when they start making that physical contact and crossing over into those real-world barriers, those can become very, very dangerous. And so anyone that you know that is being cyber stalked, please report that so that we can make sure that that person is protected and it doesn't become even more dangerous than that. All of that, and I haven't even talked about sexual predators yet. Sexual predators that are out there, and I just wanted to share with you just a little bit about what some of the law is. Now, the way that sexual predators oftentimes use social media is through something called grooming. They want to befriend someone. They want to build trust with that person. And then before long, the trust becomes, hey, let's hang out. And so it's building a closer and closer and closer relationship to make it happen where they're either in the same environment or that person trusts them enough to give them something online or through the app that that person otherwise would never have given. And some of those things, and I'm just going to share with you a couple of these criminal acts that are relating to this. In Tennessee, we have laws on the books against solicitation of a minor. That's the name of the statute, and solicitation to commit a sex act. That's a crime. Solicitation simply means asking. If you ask a minor to engage in a sex act with you, that's a crime in Tennessee. Sexual exploitation of a minor, that's a big fancy way of saying the words child pornography. And child pornography, maybe people don't even realize what the definition of that is, but it really is any photograph of a minor that is for the purpose of sexual gratification or sexual arousal or sexual excitement. So it could be a photograph of someone in their underwear, it could be a photograph of someone nude, it could be a photograph of someone engaged in some sort of an act. All those things would count under the definition of child pornography. It really is for the purpose of what the purpose of the receiver is. And it is a crime to possess that because these people are underage. And I say that again, possess that. If you possess that, you're breaking the law. It's also a crime to make that or to share that. Another crime in Tennessee is exhibition of sexual matters to minors. There's actually a criminal statute that if someone shares a photograph, not of the minor, but of the adult, some inappropriate material to the minor, there's a criminal statute that criminalizes that. And then unlawful distribution. This goes by a very popular name in modern culture, and that popular name is revenge porn. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard that, but if someone makes a photograph and they think they're sharing it just with this one person, and then that person takes that photograph and then shares it around to everyone else against the person who's in the photograph's wishes, there's a crime against that in Tennessee. Now, obviously, let me just say this. Any photograph that's produced and sent, once it's out of your hands, you have no control over what somebody else is going to do with that. And I can prosecute them all day long for what they did with your photograph, but it doesn't change the fact that they still did that with your photograph. And now everyone's seen that. So don't make those photographs. There's also a special statute applying only to minors for the juvenile crime of sexting. Now, sexting is when one juvenile shares an intimate photograph with another juvenile. And that is actually an unruly conduct in the state of Tennessee, which will put you in a juvenile court. And it says a minor commits this offense who possesses, transmits, distributes, publishes, or disseminates a photo or video that contains a sexually explicit image of the minor. Now, if that crime is committed by an adult, if an adult is the one that possesses that or makes that or distributes that, we prosecute those adults under the child pornography laws that I just talked about in the last slide. But if a minor does that, it's prosecuted under the sexting statute that our legislature has given us. And then I've already talked about you would lose control over that, so please don't create the intimate photographs. Yes, if this has happened, time heals all wounds, but it does take some time to get there. And it's a painful experience, so I encourage you not to do that. We also, maybe the last legal area that I want to talk about is false threats. There's really two statutes that are on point on this one. The first is that if someone has made a false report of a fire or a bomb or an emergency, that is actually a Class D felony in the state of Tennessee. So it is a felony to make a false threat of a bomb or a fire or an emergency. To be more on point, I guess it was last year before last, the legislature passed a specific statute with respect to schools. And it says it is a threat of mass violence. And it says that if an individual makes a threat of mass violence at a school or school activity, then they have broken this new law that's out there. And so anytime someone's talking about we're going to shoot up the school or something along those lines, that is a statute that we see the people prosecuted under and that we prosecute people under that statute. Here, though, is another part, and a lot of people don't know this. That same statute has a Part B. And Part B says it also contains a provision that criminalizes the failure to report a known threat of mass violence at a school or school activity. So if you know that someone else is going to do something, and you keep that information to yourself, you're actually committing a crime. Because the goal is public safety. We want to stop these things from happening. We don't want people making false threats, and if there's some idea that they're going to maybe act on what is a real threat, that has to be communicated so law enforcement can go into motion and do that. And I will tell you, I have been extremely impressed, and I've got the investigation slide up here. When we have had these, we mobilize the FBI, literally. The FBI is called. The DEA is called, the ATF is called, the TBI is called, local law enforcement is called. We call everybody to try to protect a school. We get on the phone with every one of them. It is cooperative investigations, and these are oftentimes successful. The problem with investigation is there are rare opportunities under the law when we can get out in front of a crime. Most of the crimes that we prosecute, someone's committed a crime and now we're after the fact prosecuting them for or doing the investigation to find out who committed it and cleaning up the pieces afterwards. But sometimes we do have the opportunity to get out in front of these. So what a lot of people, anytime you sign up for an app on social media, because I want to bring it back to that a little bit, when you sign up as a subscriber, even if it doesn't ask your name, it asks for a phone number. It asks for something that will connect your device to this account. That's what law enforcement can get. We can go to any of those companies, whatever the app is, with a search warrant or a subpoena, or oftentimes to even just a phone call, and say, hey, this was posted. We need to know on this account who is connected to this account, what device is connected, what IP address that is unique for every computer that we hold, every phone that we hold, every laptop, every computer, what is the IP address? And we also want to know the GPS coordinates of where that device was at the moment this message was sent. And we can gather that information. and we can put it together and track it down, and usually within 48 hours, some law enforcement agent is knocking on your door saying, okay, we know this was sent from your phone at 4:54 p.m. yesterday from your bedroom. So let's talk about this. So that is the type of investigations that we're able to do. So all these ideas that, nobody's going to find out or this is anonymous, those things go out the window when you start understanding IP address and GPS and everything that our phones actually do. Oftentimes people think, well, if I've got a fake account, that they can't track me down. However, we're not going off the names or the photographs on the account. We're going off the IP addresses. We're going off the GPS coordinates. So it doesn't matter if it's a fake account or a real account. We still know it's posted from your bedroom at 4:54 p.m. yesterday, and this was the message. So it still results in the same conclusion. And like I said, social media companies readily supply such information to law enforcement upon request. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to sit down here because I know I've been going way too long. But what is a parent to do? What is a parent to do? Well, we started by saying we're here because we care about people. And we don't want kids to experience these problems that we're talking about. So we've got to take all of the steps that we can to get involved and to make sure that our teens are not experiencing these negative situations. It starts with communication. And as uncomfortable as those conversations are, and I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, so you young folks in the room, I know how it is. I don't like to talk to my kids about stuff like this, but it's important, so I do it because I love them and I don't want to see anything bad happen to them. So I sit down with them and I tell them, listen, only say the things that you would want said about you. Being nice actually is a big step towards cutting back a lot of the cyberbullying that's out there. If we were to create a positive culture of peer pressure, where the one that was posting the negative things, if that was the person that was on the outside, if that was the person who was being shunned because they said something bad about someone else, if that were the culture we could create, that would be a wonderful world to live in. So don't say anything that you wouldn't want said about them. You ask your kids if it's worth getting into fights over this, because more often than not, people who post things cannot keep their mouths shut. And it ain't a half a day before they've told their buddies, hey, I was the one that said that. And then next thing you know, here comes the fight, because word travels. Is it worth getting into fights? Is it worth getting into juvenile court? Is it worth facing school discipline? Is it worth doing that just to post hurtful things about someone? We've got to teach them, our kids, to assume that every single picture that they share is going to be shown to half of the student body, period. If a picture's sent out, I don't care if it's promised, if it's private, whatever, next thing you know, there's an argument and it's out. So you've just got to assume that any picture is going to be shown to half of the student body. Teach them to report unfamiliar persons who try to contact them, and don't friend strangers. A lot of people want to pride themselves on how many friends they have on Facebook, but then before long they're friending all sorts of people they don't need to be friended. Don't friend strangers, and report unfamiliar people who are trying to contact them. Teach them not to share too much information about what they're going to do. Teach them not to share personal information like their date of birth, social security number, card numbers. Teach them that nothing is really anonymous and that there are ways even to preserve the Snapchat pics. And you may think that's crazy. Snapchat is secret and it vanishes into thin air. It's like these Mission Impossible messages that we see on the Tom Cruise movies that just go away. Not true. Not true. There are new apps that are being developed and there are ways to track that down. And let me say this, when you're communicating even via Snapchat, you're not communicating to someone who is with you. You're communicating with someone who is at a distance from you. And you never know who that person is sitting beside. You never know if that person is showing what you're communicating to maybe a police officer, or to maybe their buddies, or maybe someone else. You just never know what is actually being viewed by other people. And there are ways to preserve those. Parents also have to set boundaries. And my goodness, now I sound like a dad and I didn't want to, but here I am, right? But you've got to keep an eye on how many hours your teen is on social media. If it's consuming their life and it's causing them to perform poorly in other areas, you've got to think about what is more important. You've got to set those boundaries. You've got to keep an eye on the hours of the day that your teen is on social media. You've got to have a cutoff time. And if you're doing homework or there's other period of time that there should be where you have no social media during that period of time, you've got to set those boundaries. You've got to use privacy settings to limit who can see your post. But at the same time, realize that your friends may not have those privacy settings. So when I tag you, everybody who's on your friend's account can see it. It may become public at that point. So you've got to be careful about that. Watch for changes in your teens' attitudes, such as depression and comparing themselves to others. These may manifest in negative behaviors. Don't assume that following your child keeps you in the loop. Oftentimes, teens have secondary accounts or apps that they hide from their parents. That is unfortunately true, so make sure that you don't think, well, I can look at their Facebook account and I know what's going on. There's probably a whole lot more going on than what we know about. So those are important steps that are out there. You know, social media is like many other things in our society. It can be a wonderful tool if it's used properly, but it can be a dangerous tool if it's misused. Really, it's a sign of maturity, whether or not we can use these tools properly or not. It is a sign of maturity. My hope is that our teens will build this culture of positive peer pressure centered around social media in ways that will enrich each other's lives. Positivity can be contagious, and it's up to each of us to help make that happen. You know, the worst possible scenario is finding out that somebody has committed suicide because they couldn't handle what was being put on them on these social media chat rooms or whatever, and they just couldn't handle that. And I would not want to carry that weight around with me of being involved in that. So I'm asking everybody to be the opposite of that. Be part of the solution in this situation to make sure that we're using social media in a way that will build people up. That's really what it is for. It can be a wonderful tool if it's used properly. So, all right, well, I have overstayed my welcome, but I'm going to go sit down. But I did cover a lot of information, and hopefully you all found some of that to be helpful.
Thank you. Up next, we have Judge Beller, Judge Brandon Beller. A little bit about him. He was born October 21st, 1969 in Carthage, Tennessee. Judge Brandon Beller has served as the Smith County General Sessions Judge since September 2020 and as an attorney practicing in multiple judicial districts and appellate courts for over 26 years. Judge Beller graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in 1991 and the Cecil C. Humphreys School of Law at the University of Memphis in 1995. As an attorney, Judge Beller has extensively practiced in multiple disciplines ranging from tort liability to probate, while also serving as counsel for business organizations as well as municipal, county, and metropolitan governments throughout his career. With the range of experience and diverse clientele, Judge Beller brings a unique perspective on the judiciary and practice of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for having us here today. I think it's just a pleasure to be here today in Smith County High School to have the opportunity to speak, and really do appreciate it. Let me get my notebook. I'm not a PowerPoint man. These other younger folks are a lot more technologically adept than I am. I'm still the pen and pad and notepad. From one perspective, I think that makes me a little bit the old school style. As Christy said, I have been practicing law for, I guess it's well over 26 years now, and seen quite a bit. And during that course of time, I bring to tonight and also to what I do just a background in what's called civil law, and of course that can range anywhere from a contract to tort liability. Specific to my topic tonight is parental liability for minor children for their acts committed through use of the internet, computers, smartphones, or other types of communication devices. I do want everyone here to understand that this is for informational purposes only. I'm not rendering opinions. I have to qualify some of the things I say. Every case that you deal with is fact specific. Every case that you deal with is circumstantially specific, and there's going to be a whole different body of law that may apply in different situations. So I want to try to give a bird's eye view of what I see as the law as it pertains to these and what you parents should really be concerned about. Generally speaking, and as General Lawson touched on, the district attorney's office is responsible for the criminal matters primarily. And so that would be criminal liability. And civil liability, generally speaking, in order to be liable for the conduct of another, there has to be a duty owed to do or not do something or a particular thing. And that duty or that standard is breached in some capacity. And when you breach that standard, what is the ramifications of that? In other words, is there a causal effect, or is there some type of proximate cause that does harm to another individual? In this specific instance, we're talking about what happens when a minor gets on their smartphone or their computer and decides, as General Lawson described, cyberbullying or stalking even, or disseminating pornographic material from another student. Those are the types of things that create a risk of exposure to a parent. Plaintiffs' attorneys a lot of them are very creative. A lot of them, plaintiffs' attorneys have been known to reshape the law as we know it. Everyone has a seatbelt in their vehicle. Well, seatbelts are in vehicles because a plaintiff's attorney filed a lawsuit against a corporation. That's why you have them. It was transforming our society based on what happens in a courtroom. There are many instances of that. A parent is a target for the acts of the minor in several different ways under different thought processes as it pertains to theories of law. One of those theories that I see most often is an act called negligent entrustment. It's when you take an item or a piece of property, chattel is what some of the old texts read, but when you take that and you entrust it to someone that is quote unquote incompetent. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're incompetent in the sense of that they operate under a disability. It could, but a minor in a lot of instances can be considered an incompetent. I was listening to General Lawson and I was thinking about the maturity level about dealing with smartphones, and I was going through my mind. I think, well, you have to, if you're going to purchase a firearm, you have to get a background check. It has to be registered. If you get a driver's license, or if you get an automobile, you get a learner's permit. We don't do that with smartphones. It just seems that we can just hand one, gift one out, and here you go. You're 12 years old. Have at it. There's no training manual with it on how to use that. But those are some of one of the ways in which a crafty plaintiff's attorney would create exposure for a parent. Another way would be negligent supervision. Now, I'm going to put a little caveat to that one because in the state of Tennessee there is a doctrine of parental immunity. Now, parental immunity is not always an absolute. Parental immunity can be chipped away at. Courts don't like to delve into the areas of supervision of a parent over a minor child in a household unless it affects something directly related to a juvenile justice matter or something along those lines. There are things that are specific acts to a child, an unruly act that only a child can commit, and or a delinquent act would be the equivalent of something that an adult could have committed, but we don't call it, we don't classify them in crimes, felonies, or misdemeanors. We call them delinquent acts. And as your juvenile court judge, I see these quite often, and I'll touch on that a little later on in what I have to say. In the state of Tennessee, you have a statute, and this statute is really the Parental Liability Act. This is the law as it stands for you parents. And what it states is a parent or a guardian shall be liable for the tortious activities. And don't let that tortious activity, that's just a nice way of saying an intentional act or a negligent act of a minor child that causes injury to a person or property. Now, focus on the word injury. It doesn't necessarily denote physical harm. It can also be the stigma associated with the traumatic effects of emotions or mental health. We're seeing right now in California a defamation lawsuit that doesn't seem to end, dealing with, there's no quote unquote, there's allegations of physical harm on the periphery, but the idea is money damages as a result of damage to a reputation. So where the parent or the guardian knows or should know of the child's tendency to commit a wrongful act. So there's a knowledge element or what a reasonable person would tend to think is should know that a child is involved in a wrongful act or has a history of it that can be expected to cause injury to a person or persons. Well, if you disseminate a nude photograph of someone in your class as a student and you send it out to the student body, common sense is going to tell you that's going to cause harm to someone. If you pick up your Facebook and you post a picture or Facebook Messenger, you send a message, a picture of yourself holding a gun and with a statement underneath, "I'm going to kill you," then you should expect that on the opposite end of that line that there's going to be someone that can have an injury caused to them, and it should be a reasonable expectation of that. And where the parent or guardian has an opportunity to control the child but fails to exercise reasonable means to restrain the tortious conduct, the intent or the negligent act. The law also goes along to say that any type of, if you have a conviction in a juvenile court, that can be used as notice to that parent of that type of act. So in other words, let's say you've got a child that's been into juvenile court on a delinquent offense of assault or harassment or stalking. Those should put you on notice that there's a violent conduct involved. And that notice in and of itself can satisfy this requirement that would open up the door. What about school disciplinary records? I'm not seeing a case on that, but at the same time, I'm not certain that wouldn't apply. What about actual notice? If a parent is made aware that a son or a daughter is doing something that they should not be doing, that's going to satisfy the actual notice. But not only that, it's in an instant also if you should have known. And there could be several instances that would create that knowledge that on behalf of a parent. The statute, being though that it's statutory law, as opposed to what we call common law, statutory law is created by the General Assembly or your state legislature. And it essentially, for the most part, will preempt what they call common law. The distinction is common law are the rules and authorities that are created by the judiciary based on principle, based on time immemorial. We'll touch on that a little bit later, but suffice it to say, there's a limitation on the amount of damages that a parent can have. And under the statute, it's $10,000 plus the cost associated with that. Now, even though the General Assembly has spoken that is in fact the law, I dare say that I would not want to call that an absolute. There's a line of cases that uphold that as the law in the state of Tennessee, but at the same time, I think there's ample evidence in other cases that would suggest that there may be exceptions to that. One of the questions that I would ask as a parent is, do I have the ability and the opportunity to control the minor child? And control in the sense, do I have that opportunity to regulate the conduct, such as the smartphone, computer, or whatever device that is in the hand of this child that they have? Am I responsible for that? So it goes back to a degree of parental responsibility. And the question that I would ask is, one, who bought the device? Whose plan is it? Who is providing the service to it? Who's paying for it? Those are the types of things that are going to lend itself to who has the greatest authority over the amount of control over that particular device. We've had instances in juvenile justice where we've had a parent that will come in, and a lot of times we're very discreet about how we handle juveniles, because certainly there's some sensitivities that they're not fully developed. They have to be treated with a little bit different than you would as an adult. And one of the things that we always explore is, okay, particularly in truancy court, you have a child that's truant, and as General Lawson pointed out, the sleep deprivation, they're up all hours of night. You ask the question, okay, how is this phone or this computer being regulated? What are you doing to stifle the use of this phone? Because it's obviously having a direct correlation and impact on this child's grades. And also when they're laying in bed not getting to school, that they're being late chronically, it goes down to a thought process of remove the device from the home. And we've gone so far in some instances to actually have that court ordered. I commend the parents that go ahead and do that without even having to be told to do that, but it seems as though that a lot of times it's just a neglect of monitoring those items. Second question I always would ask is, do I as a parent have the knowledge or exercise the due care, or should have the knowledge of my child's habits, propensities to act, or is there a tendency to commit a specific act? Knowing your children, well, do they have, are there anger issues? Are there things that where they have, you've watched them or observed them do specific acts of bullying or something of that nature that would cause you to believe that maybe that type of behavior needs to be curtailed? Because if you answer that question honestly and affirmatively, then you are on notice. And these are the types of questions that I would explore if I were a plaintiff's attorney in a deposition of a parent. I would get to those issues. Specific acts that would normally be expected to cause injury to others. I think General Lawson did a wonderful job of pointing out a lot of those things. There are criminal acts that can also be utilized as civil acts. And so, not to go over that, but one of the things that I did not necessarily hear General Lawson, but how about narcotics trafficking? Well, you get a child that runs with the wrong crowd, and their usage of the smartphone or communication device can certainly create that scenario where they may be trafficking something that's as lethal as it can be, things like fentanyl, the opioids. And it's not, these are not things that we have not seen, particularly in juvenile justice. And I'm certain that there are others in this room. We have several law enforcement officers here that could testify to the same thing. How does that play into it? If you're a parent and you know something's going on, does that increase your risk of exposure? I think it does. And again, the fourth question is whether or not as a parent did you fail to reasonably exercise when you had the opportunity to do so, to restrain the child. I think we've touched on that sufficiently. So, but going back to what I had mentioned earlier about common law, of course, as we had stated, common law is that law, body of law that's developed by judges. There is a case in 2000, and it's the case of Lavin versus Jordan. It's a Supreme Court case. That case was one of the cases that essentially said that the previous law under a case called Bocock back in 1963, in the Bocock case there was an assault of minor children on another individual where the parents were held liable for the actions because they met with all the criteria that is essentially codified in the Tennessee Code Annotated that I cited to you earlier. And so, but the Jordan case is the one that said, hey, we're going to go with the statutory law. It preempts our common law, and the damages are capped. That's a very interesting case because that opinion was not unanimous. It was rendered also in the year 2000. Why is that significant that it was rendered in the year 2000? Smartphones, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram wasn't around. If it was, it wasn't prevalent. It wasn't a pariah to the student bodies across the United States of America. At that time, that we didn't have that. We were used to things like automobile accidents, violent confrontations of one individual to another. We didn't have this area of cyberbullying that is actually rampant in some areas. So the dissent in that opinion was Justice Birch. It was a 4-1 decision. Justice Birch basically said that although the General Assembly has stated that there's a cap and that you have to follow the statutory criteria, Justice Birch indicated that there was a separate cause of action called negligent supervision, and that negligent supervision is still a viable theory of law in order to create liability for parents for the actions of their children. I've not seen any cases come out of the state of Tennessee, but there are cases in other states where they've lifted the caps and allowed for those things to happen. And usually a lot of times when you see something moving in other parts of the country, sooner or later it gets here to the state of Tennessee. So I'm not going to count out that there's going to be that right case at some point that changes the law. But as it stands right now, the things that you can safeguard are things that are basically common sense when you get down to it. Know what your child's doing with their computers, with their smartphones. Know what they're doing. Don't be afraid to ask. I love what General Lawson said about communication. It is vital that you communicate, because if you're not communicating and you're unaware, then you have that scenario that can arise that catches you off guard. And then the question is, should you have known? There have been instances where the bullying has been so intense that other minors have committed suicide. There have been situations where dissemination of pictures of one person to other members of the student body, where had to transform the entire life of an individual. They had to relocate schools, had to go to other places, and all of that. A lot of them, some of them even had to go through therapy as a result of that. So the harm that that can be caused to particularly a class of persons that are not yet fully developed, that are not yet mature enough, that don't have the wherewithal to understand the perils that this world can bring to them, need an additional layer of protection. And I implore you parents, by all means, cooperate with law enforcement, cooperate with your justice system, cooperate with your schools. And when it comes to these things, the schools have a policy in place that protects the minor children. That's Mr. Winkler's topic. He's a school board attorney, so I'll let him speak to that. But your juvenile court judge in Smith County is aware of a lot of things that are going on just based on what I see. There's even one judge out of, I believe it's Marshall County, that put down an order that directed putting the student body on notice that any juvenile coming into the courtroom, juvenile justice system, that their smartphone, their cellular devices, their computers were subject to being seized at that moment. And also putting the parents under a court order. Of course, if you violate a court order as a parent, then you can be held in contempt. The child's not likely to go to jail, but the parent certainly can be if it's found willful. So these are things that I implore you to think about, and certainly it's not for anything other than the future of the children of Smith County. And so I thank you for your time, thank you for your attention. Again, Mr. Smith, thank you, sir. Appreciate the invitation. And Ms. Christie, thank you.
Okay, next up we have Mr. Kit Jenkins. Kit Jenkins graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Cumberland University in 1995, and he very recently, earned his master's degree in instructional leadership from University of Tennessee at Martin. For 21 years, Kit served in law enforcement here in Smith County, as well as surrounding counties in our region, with the vast majority of that being in investigations. He began his career working for the 15th Judicial Drug and Violent Crimes Task Force, where he spent hundreds of hours working undercover and was involved in thousands of narcotics cases. After working 10 years with the 15th Drug Task Force, he moved to general investigations in Trousdale County and eventually was brought on staff full-time at Smith County Sheriff's Office, where he worked as lead detective for the remainder of his law enforcement career. As a detective, he investigated and worked a wide array of cases, ranging from fraud to murder, and many cases that involve social media as evidence or the means to commit the crime. During his career, Mr. Jenkins has also served as a commander and team leader for 2 SWAT teams and has taught as an adjunct instructor at the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy. After leaving law enforcement, we were very fortunate to hire Mr. Jenkins 4 years ago to serve as our criminal justice teacher right here at Smith County High School. He currently teaches criminal justice 1, 2, 3, and 4, and statewide dual credit criminal justice classes.
Not to sound like a broken record, but I would also like to thank Mr. Smith and Christy for allowing me to be here and part of this panel. I don't know, it's probably understated the amount of experience and knowledge that is sitting at this table. I'm probably the least qualified of all of us here to be up here speaking. I've worked with all the law enforcement professionals here and against Brandon. Judge Beller, through the years when he was a defense attorney. And it's just, it is truly an honor to be invited and included to sit amongst this group of professionals. It really is. So thank you very much. I guess I'm gonna hammer home a lot of what General Lawson said. Our talks mirror each other a lot. The difference is that I'm gonna include a lot of stories in mine. I'm gonna tell things that I've seen, no names or places, but I'm gonna tell real stories. Because I believe that we learn through other people's mistakes. I believe that we learn through other people's their wins also. And so we're gonna talk, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna start though, I would like to say happy birthday to my daughter Kylie. She turned 15 today. And I say that not to be so selfish as to talk about my family, but I say that because 15 years ago, on one of the happiest days of my life, I would have never dreamed of the dangers that I'd have to protect my daughter from today. And it's just, you know, I was a cop. I carried a gun. I wore a badge. I felt bulletproof even though I wasn't. I knew I could protect her from the bad guys, or I felt like I could. But I've realized that protecting her from social media and from what she can do with her phone is a challenge that I never dreamed of. I never thought about it. And you know, when I was growing up, I sent pictures to people too. Here's how I did it. I had a Polaroid camera, and then we had these things called envelopes, and they had stamps. And when you put those together, we had the Instagram in the 80s. That's how we did it. And we talked to each other too back then. We didn't send messages. We talked to each other. We had this other thing in our house. We called it a telephone. And you rang it and you twisted the thing and the numbers, and then people got on the other end of it and they talked back to us. And I bring that up, and it's kind of to break the ice, but I bring that up because the other day I needed one of my soccer players to call another player. He was running late and I was worried about him. And I said, hey, you got his number? They're best friends. No. I said, what do you mean no? Well, I've got his snap. And I said, you're telling me you don't know his phone number? No. I've asked kids, what is your phone number? I don't know, I've got to look it up. How do you find that on my phone? You know, we don't use our phones anymore for phones. They're not phones. They're small computers that are hooked to the internet. Let me tell you a story about me. So last year about this time, my wife got this message, and it said, hey, is this the Kit Jenkins from Muscatine, Iowa? Now a little backstory. I grew up for about 14 years in the Midwest in Iowa. My family moved back to Tennessee in 1989. I have not spoke to or communicated with a single soul from Muscatine, Iowa in over 30 years. A buddy of mine finds me on a social media platform that I'm not even on. I don't do social media. I don't know how. I have an Instagram for my soccer team, and I screw it up regularly, and somebody else has to fix it. So my point is this. If a person that I haven't seen or heard from in 30 years can find me on a social media platform that I'm not on, what can a professional criminal do to you? And that's what I'm gonna focus on. What can happen to you? I'm gonna stay real tight on my speech, I don't know if this is a speech, my talk, about oversharing and how it can harm you. And General Lawson did an excellent job of hitting all of these avenues, and I've seen them all. But I'm going to stay very, very close to home with the oversharing. This is how a lot of us feel, right? I've said it the other day. Just the other day before I started this, I said, social media is the devil. It's evil. But that's not true. I think General Lawson said it best. It's just a tool. It's not evil. It's not good. It's neutral. It doesn't care. It's indiscriminate. It doesn't care what you do on it. You can do great things on it. It's fine with that. You can do bad things on it. It's fine with that too. It's indiscriminate. It doesn't care how we treat it. So the point being this is that if the platform itself isn't the bad thing, then, and how we treat it is where the problems are, then we can fix that. We can help our kids and even our adults by just being careful. Because we already know, and you know, don't just take it from me, General Lawson said it too. We already know the internet's not bad. The internet's not evil. Social media is not the bad thing. So the bad thing then becomes what we do with it, right? Does a lot of good things. People find love. They get married. That's an awesome thing. It's not how I dated, but it's one of the things now. General Lawson alluded to that earlier about how people are taking advantage of it. We met online and I really started to like him. When he said he needed money while traveling overseas, I didn't think twice. $3,000 later, I was brokenhearted with an empty bank account. That's true. It's a true story. Okay? So, a good thing and a bad thing, right? We go to good moments, and not just meals, but awards. And look what my kid did, and happy birthday. I haven't been invited to a birthday party at my family with a card in years. It's all Facebook. Hey, the party's this weekend. My family's had several kids born into it that I didn't know were even coming because I don't do Facebook. If my wife didn't do it, I wouldn't even know I have nieces and nephews because that's how they do things. That's a great thing. And then we got this guy. Confesses to a murder on Facebook Live. He actually committed the murder on Facebook Live. Okay? True story. So, the thing is that how we use it matters. He talked about scams. Here's one that you may see. Congratulations, $1,000 Amazon gift card. Okay? You've won. Well, here's the thing about awards. Here's the thing about getting stuff. I see why you're over here now. That light's rough. Here's the thing about getting stuff. If you didn't put in for it, you didn't win. Contests that you actually apply for and put your name in the hat and do whatever, those are the ones you win. Nobody gives free money. It doesn't happen. Okay? What they're looking for is if you click on that, they're going to ask you for some information. They're going to say things like, hey, you've won $1,000, but you have to pay us $20 processing fee. They're going to ask for a bank account. They're going to say, okay, you've won a $1,000 gift card, and I've seen this one, but we're going to send you $5,000. I need you to cash that and send $4,000 back to me. Now, does that make any sense? Absolutely not. But here's what people do. Because it's free, they go cash that check. And they don't have $5,000 in their bank account. So when that check bounces or when it's found out to be fraud, they now owe the bank the $5,000 back. That's how it works. The banks they're good people and they're great, but they have a job to do and they want that money back. And I've seen a bunch of people have to go on the payment plan to pay back their $1,000 gift card that wasn't true. We see things like this. You may have seen this pop up on your computer. Looks just like something real, doesn't it? Looks like something that you'd see, oh, okay, I got to put in my security code. I need to put in my passcode. If you'll notice in the front and back of the passcode, there's two letters. I think they're B and G. I'm not close enough to tell, but two letters. When you put in your passcode to that, that's going to them. And now they have anything that you've done. When you save things on your computer, when you've bought things on your computer, when you've done things, they know it now. Okay? If you see things like this and you're not sure, call the help desk. That's why they're there, to help. They will say, guaranteed, because I called them. No, that's not us. It's a scam. Don't do it. We don't do things like this. So we have to be careful about what we're doing. Here's another one that a bunch of you might, well, I won't say a bunch of you, but I've seen this a bunch of times. These games that we get on social media, right? The name of your first pet plus your mother's maiden name plus your elementary school equals your stage name. Or maybe it's your old address and your favorite color and something else equals your rock star name. And we all put in ours and we send it and we share it with everybody. Well, here's the thing. What do those questions remind you of? Security questions for your password. Exactly. Great answer. Thank you. Come by my room tomorrow. I'll give you a sour punch straw. Yeah, those are the same questions that you're going to put down as security questions. Those people, that's not a game. That's somebody fishing for your security information. Okay? Be careful when you do these things. I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm not saying everybody's bad. But what I am saying is this. Know who you're getting them from. Are you getting them from somebody that is reliable? Know where they're getting it from. Or is it just something that popped up that everybody's doing? Because the ones that pop up that everybody's doing, a lot of times aren't good. A lot of times they're somebody bad. They're not what they're supposed to be. So be careful of these things. With every good thing, there's bad things. It's just the great thing about what I think we're doing here today is that we can protect ourselves. We can truly protect ourselves. Every story I'm going to tell you here in a little bit is one that we could have, that those unfortunate victims could have stayed away from had they maybe sat in here with us several years ago. Had they come to the sheriff's office and talked to us first, and some of them did, unfortunately, and didn't believe us. So, most of the negative things that come out of social media are things that we do to ourselves. It's our oversharing. It's us creating the problem for us. And I believe that with the things that the two gentlemen in front of me have talked about, the monitoring, the conversations with our kids, the conversations with our husbands and wives and our significant others. I mean, this isn't, I know that we're focusing on youth, but it's indiscriminate. It hits adults too. Knowing these things is important. So let me tell you some tips right off, okay? First, never give out your name, address, phone number, email, password, or school name. That's an easy one, right? Never respond to people that you don't know, to new people online. I worked a case not long ago, or I say not long ago, it was a long time ago. I've been out for a lot of years. I worked a case a while back when I was in, where people had made friends with a group from overseas. And they started asking crazy questions, and they started scaring them, and they actually were smart enough to call us, and we went to their house, and come to find out that this group had very loose ties to groups in the Middle East, and this was, so I don't know. I don't think that responding to new people means that you're going to join a terrorist cell and pick up an AK-47. I'm not saying that. But I do know that these groups are fishing for people. They're trying to find people to finance them. Hey, we need this money. We need this. Who knows how far it could go depending on your level of cooperation with them. Hey, I need you to come pick me up at the airport. Hey, I need a plane ticket. Hey, whatever. So don't respond to new people online. If you don't know them, don't friend them. Why would you want to be friends with people you don't know anyway? Tell an adult, for you kids in here. Tell an adult if something makes you uncomfortable, scared, confused, it doesn't look right. Go to somebody. Don't assume. Go to somebody. Never post where you're going. It was brought up. General Lawson brought that up. Don't post where you're going and when you're going to be there. If you want to take a picture of your steak, I'm all for it. Take a picture of your steak. I don't care. If you want to put it out there, that's fine. Do it when you get home. So they can't say, hey, they're at Old Charlie's right now, or Timberloft, or wherever you choose to go. Be home when you do it. Because I will say this. I can't tell you how many burglaries I worked over the years. Probably over 1,000. And a vast majority of them had some sort of element where the person that got into the house knew the people at least secondhand, meaning the person you posted this to, just like General Lawson said, they may be as honest as the day is long and would never hurt you, but you don't know who's sitting next to them. You don't know who's their friend and going to see it too. And unfortunately, what we saw, and I used to tell people, hey, this is somebody that knows you. No, none of my friends would ever do this. And I'd say, I'm not saying that they did it. I'm saying that I guarantee when we find who did it, there's a relation back to somebody who knew you. And that happens so many times. So many times. Don't share details about your life with people that you don't know. I'm all for putting your awards out there. I love the fact that we can celebrate our wins. I am huge on celebrating our wins. I think we ought to do more of it. Just be smart about how we're doing it. Be sure that we're doing it to the right people. Be sure we're putting it out where it should go. So just some tips. They're very simple. And everybody probably sitting in here saying, well, that's dumb. I know that. But the problem is we all know it. But how many of us have posted that picture at dinner? How many of us have posted, hey, going on vacation, here we are at the airport? How many of us have done that? I have, and I know I should know better than everybody in here. Okay? So we all know it, but we still do it because that's what everybody does. And so we have to start protecting ourselves a little better. So let me tell you a few stories. I told you I'd tell a few stories. Let me tell one, and the sheriff, I'm going to tell one because he'll appreciate this one. We talked about my undercover work, and we talked about a social media connection. And I will say this, and I've said this my entire career, I have never, ever, ever worked a case involving a juvenile that didn't have a cell phone, computer, or social media aspect to it. Never, not one. And I don't know how many kids that I've worked over the years, a bunch. But not one of them did not have one of these elements since cell phones have been around. I policed long enough that I actually was there before cell phones, but once they came about and kids started getting them, I never worked a case that didn't have one. So I'll tell a story of how we used it to catch a predator. Gentleman was online grooming kids to be underage kids. He was an adult. He was grooming 14, 15-year-old kids to be his prey. He was a sexual predator. And an alert parent and a kid that was uncomfortable came to us, and we started using that social media platform. And here's the funny part of the story is we got him to agree to meet us. But we knew that for him to come out of his hiding, we had to have a victim there. So Kit Jenkins was short, about the height of a high school kid. Shaved his beard, put a hood on because not many kids have as nice a hair as I do. And I went walking, and here he came. And before he could figure out who I was, the sheriff and my partner at the time, Chief Shannon Hunt from Gordonsville, rolled in and was able to effect the arrest. Social media. He was finding kids through Facebook and through social media apps. We were able to catch him. They made fun of me for years and years and years that I was able to go undercover as a 14-year-old kid and that a sexual predator would like me. But we were able to take him off the street. I know of a case, I worked a case, 16-year-old girl goes to get her first checking account and she is $250,000 in debt. Now, I don't know how they got her information. I don't know if it was a social media thing. I don't know if it was just an identity theft, which General Lawson explained very well earlier. $250,000 in debt at 16. They ran her credit to get a checking account. Of course, nobody had ever checked her credit before. So, were we able to get it fixed? Yes, but it is a pain. We have to go to all the credit bureaus. We have to go through the banking process. Never caught who did it. It was impossible to figure it out. But, oversharing of information probably led to this issue. Can you imagine going to the bank with your loved one, your kids, going to the bank as kids, and they say, hey, you have $250,000 in debt. And that's what this girl had, $250,000. Had another lady, single lady, she was lonely. And on social media, she met a man. And we talked about there are success stories, Match.com and some of those, somebody gets married every 12 seconds or finds love every 30 seconds or something. And I mean, that's great if that's happening. Super. Everybody should find somebody. But she found somebody. Sent her a picture, Colonel in the military. I mean, he looked sharp. He was squared away. Even talked to her on the phone. But Colonel in the military needed some help with finances. He's going to come back and marry her. He's going to take her with him. She drained her bank account. for a man that wasn't there. Believed it so hard that when I came and told her about it, she said, "No, you're wrong." And I said, "Ma'am, I promise you this is going to go bad." Drained her bank account. Ended up with nothing before she figured it out. Another gentleman, one of those rewards, he wins a car, going to win a Cadillac. All he's got to do is pay the shipping. Sends $5,000 to these people. Now, Cadillacs are worth a lot more than $5,000. That's a pretty good deal. Car doesn't show up. He calls them. They say, "Had problems. If you'll send another $2,000, I think if you'll send another $2,000, we can get it to you. We ran into some shipping issues. Gas is high." Sends $2,000. Shows up at our office and says, "Hey," and we tell him it's a scam. Don't send any more money. The bank actually called us and said, "We can't keep covering this. He's about to run out." And we said, "Don't do it anymore. Don't do it anymore." And he did it anyway, to the point where his entire life savings was gone on a Cadillac that never existed. Now, are you going to do that? Probably not. Am I going to do that? Probably not. But the fact is that the oversharing of our information is what got us there. He was willing to play their game. And I think that's what we need to teach our kids, is that, and maybe even our adults, we can't play their game. You have to be responsible with what is out there on the internet and what you can do with it, especially. So let me talk a little bit about the second part of the oversharing, and that's going to be inappropriate material. And again, General Lawson, I think me and him probably should have got together before we got here today. We probably should have called each other and said, "Hey, let's work this out a little better." But I'm going to hammer home some of the things he said, and I'm going to try to do it in a way that is correct but is a little more personal to those of us out here. It's an unfortunate trend that we're sending pictures that are explicit, but it's there. We're seeing it. And I have I think I have a unique position in this panel, because I did 21 years in law enforcement, but now I'm in the school system. So I'm kind of seeing both ends. I hear what they say in my class. I hear what they say in the halls. And then I remember all the cases that I worked, and I think, well, I see how that happened now. I get it. And as bad as these photos are, and as embarrassing as they can be, and the things that I've seen, there's more problems to them. And one of the big problems is that they're illegal. He talked about it. Possession of explicit pictures of people under the age of 18 is illegal. And I think what we miss in this whole thing is there's no little fine print at the bottom that says, now, if you're the one who took the picture of yourself and sent it, we understand that you just made a mistake. But now the guy who you sent it to, that's showing the entire soccer team or football team or whoever, he's a bad guy. That's not what the law says. What the law actually says is that it is illegal to possess material that includes a minor engaged in sexual activity or simulated that is patently offensive. Basically, anything that an adult would look at and say, "That's not right," can fall under this. And the problem with the law, or not the problem with the law, the problem with investigating and working these cases is that it goes on to say that it is even more, I won't say more illegal, that's probably not exactly right, but it is an aggravated offense when you send it. Well, let's think of it this way. If you're dating so-and-so and you take a picture of yourself and you hit send, what have we done? We have possessed a picture that's illegal, and then we've sent it. We've distributed it. So where we ran into problems with these cases was that every time that we did one of these, I'd have mad mom or dad come in my office, and they'd say, "We need some help." And I'd say, "I'm going to skip the pornography because he did a great job explaining it." They'd come in my office and they'd say, "Detective Jenkins, we need help." And I'd say, "I'm here to help you. What do you need?" Well, 2 years ago, my child took a picture of themselves, shouldn't have done it. I know they shouldn't have. I took their phone, I've spanked them, I took everything they got, I took their car, I took everything, blah, blah, blah. But they sent it to their boyfriend, and they've been broke up for a year, and now that picture's at the school, and it's going around the student body. Can you help? And I'd say, yes, I can. Let's go through some of the problems, though, some of the elements that we're going to have to get into here. And almost without fail, when I said, here's the problem that I'm going to run into is I can talk to that guy or girl, and I can charge them. And I can charge everybody who possesses that picture if I can find them. But your child broke the law too, and it's going to be hard to charge them with exactly what they did. And every time the parents would say, what? And I'd say, I don't know how I can discriminate against, I mean, we're all doing the same thing. And every time that it went to this, well, I don't want them charged, then can we just make it stop? And that's where I would call the school system and say, hey, we've got an issue here. Can you try to get this handled? Because then it fell outside of my realm because it was no longer a case that they wanted to prosecute criminally. The sad thing being is that even in the cases where we didn't prosecute, what we ran into is that to prosecute those cases, there's embarrassing moments. Somebody's going to see that picture. Your lawyer, the DA's office, me as a detective. If it's a jury trial, could even have a jury have to look at it, even if it was in some sort of sequestration by themselves. Might have to have, you might have to get up and testify as the victim and talk about it, okay? The thing is this, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I agree 100%, but let's add to that. Pictures taken and put over social media are forever. They don't go away. And we've said, I think this is the third time you've heard that now. They are there. I have wrote search warrants for information that was years old and found it. I have wrote subpoenas for information that was years old and found it. I've broke phones that were, and by broke I mean got into phones through using the resources at our Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's crime lab. I have got into phones that were unbreakable and you couldn't get in. I have found information on people's phones that they thought was the deepest, darkest hiding place that they could ever have them because they didn't ever want anybody to know. It's there. It doesn't go away. It will never go away. As long as until the zombie apocalypse, I guess, until the internet goes down, till all the servers are down, it's there. It's there. And people don't understand that. Delete on your device doesn't mean delete. It means you can no longer see it. That's all it means. It doesn't mean delete. And we need to understand that when we talk to our kids and when we talk to others about this, that 10 seconds of bad choice can haunt you for years. Years. I've worked many cases. Most of them were months to years old. Very seldom did I get the case next day. Most of them were months to years. I have had juniors and seniors in high school come to me with a picture that was taken when they were in the 8th grade that was being shown 4 years later. And I had to go through that story that I just told you. The taker of the photos committed the crime. The victim is going to have to testify even if they don't get prosecuted. Judges, juries, magistrates, officers, who knows who might have to see this photo for us to be able to go forward even. I'm not saying that we won't. Our DA's office was all behind me. If I wanted to prosecute somebody, I don't know that they ever turned me down on a case that I thought we needed to go forward with and that I had the proof to go forward with. They've never said, no, that's not one we're doing. But, and I think General Lawson would say the same, and I think Judge Baylor would too, a lot of times the victims in these cases, it's hard on them. It's hard on them. It's hard to go up there and talk about the mistakes we make. It's hard to go up there and tell the dumb stuff that we've done. It's hard to look at the guy across or the girl across the room and point the finger at them and say, yes, that's the one that I sent my nude photo to, or whatever. So even if we can go that far, we got to remember that these are lasting impressions that can, I think, was talked about therapy, was talked about things, as bad as suicide. These are things that cause those mental issues, and I think that it's important for us to understand. So I'm going to end with this. Internet is forever. Respect it. My final word is this. We can protect ourselves at some level by monitoring the use of our social media and being smart about what we post. Nothing's 100%. I'm not going to tell you I've had my identity stolen. They didn't get anything out of my account because I didn't have anything. But I've had them get my stuff, and I'm pretty careful with things. I don't know how it happened, don't know where it happened. So nothing's 100%. But I can say this: you can minimize your exposure by minimizing your exposure. And what I mean by that is this: you can limit the ability of those who would use social media to prey on people by not giving them the information they need. Limit your exposure on the internet. Limit your exposure in social media, and that will limit your exposure to the bad people. It can protect you against potential legal action, and at minimum, maybe an embarrassing moment that you're not going to be able to live down for very long. So I hope, again, thank you so much for letting me be here. I loved all my time in law enforcement. Some of you I may have worked cases for over the years. If I did, I hope I solved it for you. If I didn't, it was my partner's fault. The school system has been great. I love teaching what I'm teaching. I love preparing the next generation for possibly going into a very difficult time in law enforcement. It's been just an honor to be here, and thank you for your attention. I hope you've learned a little bit from it, and I'm going to let the next presenter go. Thank you all.
Okay, we have one more speaker, and I'm excited about Mr. Scott Ridgway. I asked him to speak on behalf of students and the emotional well-being. So let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Ridgway. Scott has been working in the field of suicide prevention, the Child Advocacy Center, and children's mental health for over 30 years. In 2020, he accepted the position of Executive Director after working with the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, and the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services as Executive Director, Director of Field Operations, and Admission Director, respectively. That's a lot. As Executive Director, Scott is responsible for the day-to-day operation at the Child Advocacy Center. He supervises the forensic interviewer and the family advocate, as well as overseeing interns and volunteers. He is a trained facilitator for the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children, which is offered at no cost to adults in the 15th Judicial District. Mr. Ridgway is active in the community, raising awareness of child abuse, partnering with stakeholders to increase funding for the Child Advocacy Center, and producing fundraisers. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Director Smith, thank you to all the other distinguished guests. Y'all have outshined yourself because you've really have given me a different idea and understanding of the law and what needs to happen. We've talked about, I have to stand over here because my head's getting sunburned and I'm a little bit out of the light, but we've talked a little bit about suicide. And what I want to say to you all is that when we think about suicide and we think about our young folks, we think about that we always want our kids to be happy. We want them to grow in a great environment. We want them to be supported by their families. We're so appreciative of all of our school personnel and what they do to make a difference in the lives of our kids. But what happens is with social media, you've heard about all the different things that is that sometimes as adults, we are not good role models for our young folks. And so when we think about, screen time, the average child spends about 7 to 9 hours on the phone. Think about the adults spending all of this time on their phones and so forth. And we've got to take it back to the family roots, or what I tell my son and his wife, and if we're going to have dinner, we're going to have dinner and we're going to fellowship and talk about the good things. We're not all going to sit on our telephones and see what's happening on Facebook and so forth. When I got into this position, and it's been almost 2 years coming up, I'm not a social media person, let me say that. I am a Facebooker because it has, like General Lawson says, it has really kept me in touch with people that I've graduated from, high school. We're getting ready to celebrate our 40th class reunion coming up in August, and I'm looking forward to going to Pennsylvania and seeing all of those folks. It's connected me to fraternity brothers in college. I graduated from Cumberland with my master's about 20 years ago. So it gives that opportunity that I can check out things and see, so-and-so passed away, so I might want to need to go pay my respects. And so I use Facebook in that sense and celebrate the goodness of what's going on. Yes, it's great to see that, we ate down here at Burger King and they had specials for, 2 Whoppers and so forth, but that makes that person happy. But we've got to figure out what's going on with our young folks that's making them spend so much time on a phone or spending so much time with video games. Why are they isolating themselves? Why are they not communicating with others? Why in the morning when they wake up, they're so tired? Well, we can tell you all kinds, and I've heard it over the years, shut off the Wi-Fi when you go to bed as an adult. Well, guess what? They're going to eventually get on, okay? Or, you're paying for their phone so you can find out by pulling the bill where they, well, I think having those conversations are so important for us to find out what's going on in the child's life, what's going on in your child's life. Some of you may not have children, but guess what? You have nieces, you have nephews. Some of you are grandparents. My son is getting ready to I'm going to be a peepaw. I'm excited. August, I'm going to be a peepaw. They're going to have a little girl. Her name is Charlie Marie. Okay? And so I'm excited about that. But I think what we've got to do as adults is play a role in our children's life. When I worked for the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, and basically we were trying to pass legislation to get 2 hours of trainings for school staff, I would have reporters or people say, why is it so important for the school staff to have training in suicide prevention? Because last year or 2 years ago, we just had legislation that we need to make sure school personnel are trained on bullying, okay? So I'm going to go back, it's not cyberbullying because the iPhone hadn't come out. It was actually bullying in the schools, and what are we going to do to control that? And I said, the thing about it is our young folks spend the majority of their waking hours in a school setting. And so being able to train adults in a school setting, okay, warning signs of kids being bullied, okay, kids thinking about suicide, okay, and then kids that have been sexually abused. We as adults have to be able to recognize those warning signs. And it's so important that those trainings are held every year on an annual basis, okay? Because social media, you heard from the panel, is, yes, we can try to prosecute, we can try to get the evidence, and that all takes time, okay? But what doesn't take time is our kids' emotions, okay? How they feel, all right? How many of you all grew up when, we used to walk to school and there was 10 inches of snow on the ground, you heard that from your parents, or how many of you heard, well, guess what? We're in a whole different generation, all right? And so when your child tells you something, what we need to be is good role models and listen to what's going on in their life, okay? Talk to them about, why are you feeling this way, okay? I can't imagine how you're feeling today, all right? I'm not in your shoes. That's what our children want to hear. They want to be able to hear that you validate their feelings and their emotions, okay? Why are you having such a difficult time this morning getting up, okay? Well, guess what? Just like one of the panelists said, they were too busy on the phone at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, all right? When we notice that our children's appearance is starting to change, all right, that's when we need to be able to ask those questions. What can I do for you? And I don't know how many, I even asked Christy earlier about my good friend Annette Horn, that basically was when we lost a child in Smith County. I want to say it's been 15 years ago, and he was bullied, severely bullied. But being able to deal with the aftermath, we don't want any child to think about suicide, but we need to be able to ask the right questions. You know, when a child gets anxious and you're asking them a question, sometimes they fear that you're going to punish them for giving you the answer, okay? And I think what's important for us to be able to do is, you know, I'm your parent or I'm your teacher, and I want to help you get through this process and deal with what's going on, whether it's in the school, whether it's at the church, whether it's at the community center or so forth. But being able to validate how they feel. I think, you know, I'm gonna read off this because I know y'all are, it's already it's almost 8 o'clock, is being a good role model is so important. I think that what we have to do is show respect to our children for their feelings and their emotions. Being able to make the child feel loved, feel wanted, feel that they're validated, okay? Keep your word. You know, I think so many kids are disappointed today in society because their parents didn't keep their word. You know, I tell the story, and I've told it many times, is that when Matthew was going to college or when he was in high school or whatever, I'd get this text message that say, "Dad, can we go to the Predators game tonight?" And I'd say no, then I'd get a response, "Well, I knew you were going to say that." And so what I would do is say, "Let's talk about it when you get home." Because I might could pay for the Predators game 2 weeks when I get paid, but trying to explain that in the text message, my son cannot see those emotions that I'm trying to express through a text message. And then maybe he's going to understand. So we shouldn't do everything through text messaging and making sure that they understand that let's encourage our child's creativity. You know, if the child wants to be involved in the church youth group, but as a parent we don't want to provide that transportation, then how are we going to expect that child to be able to thrive, whether it's playing softball, being involved here, and so forth? We have to build our children's self-esteem. And by building their self-esteem is by us acknowledging they're doing good. You know, every child is not an A student, okay? Some are B's, some are C's, and so forth. And so what we've got to be able to encourage that, you know, if your child you know that hates chemistry and comes home with a C, let's praise that child that he didn't fail the class or she didn't fail the class, that basically maybe next time we can help you get that B. Stay involved. I think it's so important. We need to know who our children's friends are, who they're involved with. You know, you can do as much as you can with monitoring their iPhones, but guess what? You're not there 24 hours a day. Discipline your child fairly and make sure that it's based on the behavior and not the child, okay? And that's important because if you have 5 children, you know, you may discipline this child for this, and then the same behavior happens, and then this child gets something else because he was bad. So make sure that you focus on the behavior. Set up some family traditions. You know, yes, we're all on social media, but we can do family traditions. Why don't we go to the park and take a walk this Sunday after church? Why don't we create something that they will remember in the long run? And then I think the other thing and last thing that I'd say is think positively. Be positive with your children. I know that's sometimes hard. We've got single parent families that may be listening in the viewing area and so forth. It might be that you get your other family involved, a grandparent or a cousin or someone that can help you. And I know that families struggle these days. Sometimes what we need to do as parents is count to 10. Count to 10 before you react. And that is a way that you can help your emotions not get in the way of being able to discipline the child. If you want help, there's help out there, okay? And I think that's easier said. This school system is amazing, okay? You've got dedicated teachers, you've got dedicated counselors and support staff that will be able to help families maneuver everything that needs to happen. If you feel like your child's being bullied, you know, or cyberbullied online, tell someone in the school system, okay? You know, report it to the local police department. Get people involved, because sometimes as parents, We can't handle things by ourselves, but being able to get other people involved is very, very important. Finally, listen to your child, okay? Take the time, you put your phone down, okay, and listen. Have family time. Even if each night as a family you sit for 15, 20 minutes, okay, 15, 20 minutes, be able to have that valuable time to find out how the day went. Because they may tell you something that's going on in their life that will help you be able to gauge your feelings the next morning about how you're going to react to that child. And the last thing is, never keep a secret with a child. Even when I talk to the young people over here, thank you all for being here. It's good to see. Our young people can be the future leaders, and they are the future leaders, where they can also be very positive to their peers. Being able to engage. If a child tells one of their best friend that I got this picture last night, then their friend needs to be able to not keep it a secret and get an adult involved. I think about, the 15th Judicial District Child Advocacy Center has an Instagram account, and I was trying to figure that out. I'm like you, I'm just like, no, I don't know. But I called my son one day, and I said, I don't know what these women are that just want to be my friend. They just keep popping up. And some of the pictures of these women were like, and Matthew said, Daddy, delete, 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 because that gets into scam. Okay, and I thought I was popular, and I was like, no. So many people fall for so many things, and I appreciate General Lawson. He serves on our board of directors and was one of our founding members and so forth. It was I'm always trying. I'll ask anybody for money. And Mom always said, if they said no, you can go back to them and ask them later for something else. But General Lawson saw something on Facebook, and he tagged me and said, Scott, it was every nonprofit can apply for this $1,000. All you need to do is apply. Well, you know me, the minute I got in that office, I opened that computer and I clicked it and I started filling out all this information. Well, guess what? It was not social media, but it was dealing with social media with fundraising and so forth. And then I started to investigate, went to the website. Well, before you know it, I'd already signed up for it, and I already got 4 email messages from people that were wanting us to buy their service to help our agency raise money. And I thought, oh, how am I going to? And then I started researching a little bit more. And in the country, there's only 4 $1,000 award winners in the entire U.S. And it all boils down to technology and stuff. So there's always some type of gimmick that's dealing with social media. And I'm sad to say that I've heard these stories about people giving money. You know, I know some folks that have told me these stories, and I think, how could you be so, what is wrong? It's that feeling of wanting to be accepted. That's all it is. You know, if somebody on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, I mean, someone said the devil's the next TikTok. TikTok's the devil's what it is. And I said, well, I don't have a TikTok account, but I do go on TikTok once in a while, and I can just laugh for an hour. Laugh. And I say, oh my goodness, I just wasted 1 hour. But guess what? All I did was laugh, and I felt good. And too bad that other people couldn't find social media where they could make them feel good and smile and so forth. But there's so many predators, and the cases that we see from children that maybe have been sexually abused and they've been online, it is terrible. It's terrible. So definitely as parents, and I tell this audience that are viewers that are listening, please just once in a while scan that, ask your kids, that's establishing that rapport. Let me see your phone and see, you can see my phone, share, have that conversation, but find out what kind of apps is online. Thank you.
Good evening. For those of you that may not know me, my name is Jamie Winkler, and Ms. Glover asked that I conduct the moderating of the question and answer portion. I'm a local attorney with Beller & Winkler here in Carthage, and our office has been local counsel for the Smith County Board of Education with Mr. Beller for well over 40 years. Before we begin, I wanted to make sure and introduce the rest of our very esteemed expert panel that's here tonight to answer any questions. We're very fortunate to have with us tonight Sheriff Steve Hopper, sitting in the middle there from Smith County, Director Barry Smith, who introduced and welcomed us here tonight, Mr. Charlie Belote, an investigator with the 15th District with the TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and then finally on the end here, Mr. Mike Dunn, who's worked in several capacities over the years, including orchestrating the very first undercover drug sting using social media back in 2002. He's currently a special agent with Internal Affairs for the state of Tennessee. This is how this is going to work. It's not complicated. There's two microphones to my left and my right. If you have any questions, please come to the mic and ask those, and we'll direct those where they need to go. I know it's getting late in the evening, but I'm sure they're ready, willing, and able to answer those. I have the good fortune to work with just about everybody at this table about every day. I cross-examined Kit and the sheriff and extensively. That's always fun. But if anyone has any questions, please come forward. I would, while people are coming down, I might start with Mr. Belote and touch on something that Kit had said about whether is anything truly deleted. If you're able, can you pretty well get anything that you need?
Thank you very much. And can everybody hear me? I don't have too close or too far away. The question about is anything ever permanently deleted? It's kind of a twofold question. It can depend on time frames. So the answer to that part would be yes, things can be permanently deleted. But it's very subjective to what it is being deleted. If it's deleted off of a phone, well, it's still encrypted on that hard drive on the phone, which can reach, we have software to extract deleted content as well as active content on the phone. Stuff with social media, Facebook's whole thing, Facebook, which also includes Instagram, holds things for years. It's a simple preservation letter you send in to whichever social media platform, mine is Snapchat, and they will preserve at the request of an officer or an agent or whichever terminology you use, that for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, typically before the 90 days is well over, you have your legal process to search to whichever platform it is, typically a search warrant, and then you can get your content from there. I do this all the time. And Facebook holds everything. Pictures, messages, deleted stuff. So it depends on the time frame, but yes, things can be permanently deleted, but you're talking about years. Once it goes to the internet, however, it is not deleted. It's there forever.
Hey, is this on? All right. My name is Jeremiah Pierce. I'm a youth pastor at Gordonsville First Baptist Church. Let's turn over here. See you guys there. Anyways, I actually have a twofold question. One, just working with youth parents, but also just being in ministry for a long time as well. Outside of that, one thing I've discovered is a lot of parents don't really kind of just give the phone. You implied that earlier to a 12-year-old and just went with it. So first question is, what do you see as, how would I put this? What has been your experience in working with parents and stuff like that, and I don't want to say naivety because that makes it, I think you know what I mean by that. I don't mean that negative or anything like that. But what has been your experience and like maybe even percentages of what you would kind of guesstimate of how much involvement parents even have any idea of what their kids are actually doing on their phone? And the other side of that question is there's also apps out there like Bark and Covenant Eyes and stuff. I know some of those are more specific for different things, but what has been your experience with parents and other issues and stuff when it comes to apps such as that actually help parents protect their child, or even adults protect themselves as well? Have you seen that as a positive thing? So.
All right. Probably call Judge Fellows out. I think he probably would be best to answer that.
One of the things that we do in juvenile justice, we really strive to identify the issue that you just described. That a lot of the parents are not as savvy as they need to be. They don't know what the children are. We have actually folks that can, at the appropriate case and at the appropriate time, go into a home to help with that issue. It is an issue, and it's an issue of education in a lot of areas. I think with you being a youth pastor, I think you probably can see that quite a bit. There are resources here in Smith County that folks, Johnny Ray has a mentor program that we utilize heavily in our justice program. We use, I think Miss Barbara Knapple has chosen to change. So there are through the juvenile justice track. But certainly we'd love to see more of that before we even get to that place. That's something that is a good topic to hit on.
I don't think we've heard from Mr. Dunn yet, and one item we mentioned in his introduction, and there's been a great deal of discussion about social media being a tool, and a tool can either be used for positive or negative, I think we've seen. But just in Mr. Dunn's experience, perhaps you mentioned the drug sting. How does law enforcement utilize that social media presence to perhaps help its investigation?
Thank you, sir. I was asked to tell that story tonight, and I'm in my 31st year of law enforcement, began my career in Nashville, and I guess my most exciting days were working in the Vice Division of Metro Police Department, several years undercover, and that's when this occurred. We were kind of a slow evening watching projects near Murfreesboro Road, and noticed a Cadillac with a gentleman in it that did not live there, pulled through and picked up a prostitute, and went about a block away, and the prostitute went in what we knew was called a crack house, and she came back out momentarily, and they drove up the block, so we pulled them over, and sure enough, the gentleman had given her some money so she could buy some crack, and they could enjoy the party together, then escalate from there. And of course, first thing she wanted to do was rat him out, because she wanted to stay out on the street and continue her trade. But the gentleman himself was an attorney, and he was from the west side of Nashville, and the last thing he wanted to do was go to jail as an attorney for buying drugs, especially in picking up a prostitute. So I said, well, why are you in town doing this? And he said, well, I'm kind of hooked on crack, and meth was kind of unheard of back then, unless it was a Vanderbilt, what we call a Vanderbilt party drug, or in the homosexual underworld. And this gentleman was a undercover homosexual, and he said he usually got his narcotics online. I said, online? How do you get narcotics online? He said, in chat rooms. He said, in chat rooms, and this is back in the dial-up days. This is Tom Hanks' You Got Mail days. And if you've ever seen the movie, and this is before Facebook, MySpace, you name it, before all those that were on the board earlier, before Craigslist even. The only thing that this gentleman used was AOL.com and Gay.com, and both of those had chat rooms. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. And he was a fairly wealthy man, and he had a unique laptop back then. It was the size of 2 or 3 of them now. But I said, we're going to set this up in a hotel room. We're going to have a takedown room and a setup room. And I'm told we were the first ones in Tennessee to do this. So by the end of the evening, he'd set up a false profile on gay.com, and which looks exactly like today's Facebook, by the way. And back then, he picked some unfortunate person's picture from out west that had no idea he was using his picture, and set up as a fake profile, and all the language of that culture for what they call the PNP, the party and play back then. Party being the drugs and play being the reputable behavior. And by the end of the evening, we had 14 different people show up at that hotel room because of that drug sting, and it was like throwing a chicken liver in a catfish pond. It was just unbelievable, one right after the other. And every single one of them, we didn't want them to attend the party unless they brought narcotics. So we had drug after drug after drug after drug show up. And from that group, we developed more informants and flipped them on their sources and escalated out from there. But that was the first time we had experienced narcotics online. And when it was a rainy day after that in the field where we weren't buying dope ourselves or picking up prostitutes or doing gambling things, we went online with an informant and we started reeling them in. And it was always effective, and it's even more now, as you all might know. One thing I want to touch on is these things right here. This is the absolute world to our youth. This is their world. This is their culture, more than you and I could ever understand. Back in our day growing up, if somebody said something about us, well, we can get over it. Someone says something negative about your child on here, you talk about being shamed. They are shamed, and more than we'll ever understand, because this is their world. And imagine how many streaks they do during the day. If you were to take their phone away, you know what streaks are. Just sending a picture to somebody. That's a streak, and they have daily records of streaks. That's how important these devices are to our youth. And if you would take the time to inspect what you expect out of your children, look in this thing and look for the things they're into, not just online, but look at the discussions taking place on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the things they're looking at, but what other children are saying. And it's absolutely filthy. It's obscene, and it's full of vulgar material, and that's the culture this is introducing them to. Whether you're homeschooled, whether you're church attending, whether you're a fairly conservative family, this is at their fingertips 24/7. And you've got to take the time to look into what your children are dealing with daily. This is their culture. And you and I have a hard time understanding that because they're drowning in it. That's all they deal with all day long, all night long. And I'll say this, don't be afraid to save your kids from what they don't know. They don't know the dangers that are on there. Several gentlemen have alluded to it today. Don't be afraid to look through there and tell them what's good and what's bad. Yes, you might hurt their feelings. They might feel restricted. They're not being able to do what their friends are doing. But it is so bad. Please get on there and look. And how many suicides have we heard of because of depression and things brought on by this, because it's communicated by this? How many people remember Minnie Pearl? Minnie Pearl. One of the little things I did when I was back in my early days, I guarded her. And she said that people didn't used to read the Grinder Switch Gazette to find out what happened. They used to read it to find out who got caught, because gossip was so bad. You read the newspaper to find out who got caught. Well, this is even worse. Everybody knows everything in an instant, and it's worse than you and I could ever imagine. So please take the time to find out what your children are exposed to. They might not be the ones saying it, but they're being exposed to it 24/7, just amongst their friends. Please take the time to due diligence to be the parents that we should be. Thank you.
Don't think we've talked a lot possibly about the negative and maybe some of the positive, but perhaps Sheriff Hopper, how his office is using social media and things like that for public safety in a good way.
Again, Mr. Smith, appreciate you having us here. A lot of what we're doing on social media is making awareness of a lot of the drug arrests that we're making. Putting it out there. We don't put the names. We don't anything. We're just showing our people of our county what is actually out there and what you need to be watching for, because there's some stuff out there now that just two little grains of the fentanyl, exposure to that, and it's over. And we just worry so much about the youth and all the exposures and things that are out there, and the predators that we talked about, try to lure them in. But our thing is that, if we can work on the drug problem, a lot of the other things will fall in place. I've said it before that if you can slow it down, you'll never stop it, but if you can slow it down, you'll slow down your assaults, you'll slow down your overdoses, you'll slow down murders, thefts, home burglaries, and things like that. But and that's the reason we put and use our social media to make our county and everybody aware of the drugs that are out there and what we're trying to do to prevent it from reaching our children. And we use text, set up drug deals with text or Facebook or whatever social media means that we can to set those up and to take these drug dealers down and get them off our streets. General Lawson is, I've served with him on the 15th Judicial Preventive and Violence Crimes Task Force for several years. And he is very supportive. He is adamant about prosecuting these drug crimes because he understands the importance in getting these things away from our children and not letting them be out there for them to get hold of. And talking about the predators that are out there, I can't tell you the times that, and y'all have touched on it, grooming, and they get them to trust them online and get them to come out and meet them. And you've got to warn your children don't do that, because you may never see them again after that. I've had several, you're talking about the photos online, I've had several adults, but I have had some juveniles contact the sheriff's office, and they don't want to talk to nobody but the sheriff. They don't want to talk to a deputy. They want the sheriff. You get them online and they're tore all to pieces. They're adamant. It's the sheriff. I've been online talking to this person. And I did something I should have done. I sent them a new picture of myself. And now they turn around and they want money from me, or they're going to plaster my picture all over the internet. And, it's a scam. Somebody wants money, but don't fall for those kind of things.
Any other? And perhaps we'll conclude with the last point if there's no other questions from the audience.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
First off, my name is Randy Glover, law enforcement officer here, school board member, and most importantly, I'm a parent of children right here in Smith County. I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here today. It means a lot. Leading up to this, I've had a couple parents that could not be here, and they kept asking me questions, and I told them, whatever questions you want, I would bring forth to you guys, and they could hear it from you personally. So I have two questions. Maybe General Lawson, you may be able to answer this one. They want to know, as a parent, if you find a picture on your child's phone, what are the steps to do? And what are the repercussions if they try to deal with it themselves? Are there liabilities to them deleting that or that sort? Those are the questions that they wanted to answer.
Well, I'll start by saying this. One of the things about being a prosecutor is something called prosecutorial discretion. And in every case that we have, when the family sits down with me and they talk about the facts of the case and what has transpired, we make a decision about, okay, who is the person here that we want to go after. And obviously, I'll tell you this, if the photograph has been deleted, that is critical evidence in the case. So if something is deleted, we're probably going to be unable to go after the person, whoever it is that they are interested, who is basically produced this or possessed this or whatever, distributed. So I would, if there's an interest in prosecuting that person, I would definitely not delete that photograph. I would bring it to law enforcement, let law enforcement make a copy of that phone, let them have possession of that, and then we can delete it from there off of the phone if we need to, or we may end up just seizing that in another fashion to make sure that it's there. But that is critical evidence if we're going to go forward with anything. There are exceptions on some of these statutes that if a person receives a photograph that was not solicited, something they did not ask for, that somebody just sent to them, and they immediately delete it under that statute, it does provide a legal defense for them. And so if you know, we're certainly not interested in going after an innocent party in this matter. But if a parent does see something on the phone that they are interested in us pursuing through the legal recourse, don't delete that, bring that to law enforcement, let's get a detective assigned to that, and let's start working that case the way it ought to be worked. But I just wanted everyone to know that if something is sent to you and it's not something that was solicited, it was something that was unaware, something you didn't even want on your phone, that if that is deleted, there is a legal defense for that with respect to possessing that item.
And then finally, perhaps, don't think we've heard from Director Smith since the start of the evening. Maybe the question, the problems you see coming across your desk from a student discipline to bullying, how many of those would you say there's some social media connection to?
I'll go back to what Mr. Jenkins said. I would say roughly 100% in some manner goes back either to a laptop, computer, most of the time now a smartphone. We grew up in a different generation. Mr. Ridgway did a fantastic job pointing out. I have a young man that's worked for me that's like mine, and I feel like I'm pretty in touch until the other day. Tell you a story. He's very intelligent, and I was telling him that we're going to have to go get one of her pieces of equipment worked on. And young man travels back and forth check 3 times a week. And I said, we've got to set the bowling green. Went on a week or two, and he said, I got this appointment made. He said, is bowling green between here and Cooper? And he can't put it in his phone. These children are that, I mean, we're that dependent. And back to what, again, I kind of go out for a hobby sometimes at dinner and count the people in the family, and then most times, if there's 4, there'll be 4 on the phone. There's no interaction. And those of you who know me, you know sometimes I don't expect other people, but I work 14, 16 hours a day most days doing something, and I have to stay on my wife because it's the world's greatest babysitter. Because we find good parents find themselves taking the place of a parent or human interaction. But yes, Mr. Winkler, I do think it's a massive issue, a massive problem. I think, Ms. Rush, you touched on it, but as speaking for the principals and the teachers and administrators sitting here, one of the questions we have, I get them sent to me. Fortunately, most of the time it's on my computer at the office, but I do occasionally get a crazy photograph saying, hey, I got this from one of the coaches and they took it, what do we do with it? So what do we need to do to make sure liability-wise, because I wouldn't want myself or one of them to set up and say, okay, now look at Mr. Smith's phone, he's got child pornography on it. So what would be the proper steps? Whoever, Mr. Beller or Mr. Lund, who to give us some advice sitting here about we need to handle that also.
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Judge Beller talk about any sort of liability issues there, because I'm not a civil attorney, so liability is a little bit outside of my scope. But I would say this: anytime that something is received like that, as a parent, I would want to know if these images were circulating around about my child. So I would call law enforcement, I would let law enforcement come and take that image, and then I would let law enforcement reach out to the parents and say, you know, this is what was received. Certainly, if it was something that was non-solicited, that person who received that is not going to be somebody who's prosecuted or anything of that nature. You know, you would exercise their discretion saying this person's done nothing wrong. So you wouldn't do anything, but we would turn that over to law enforcement. I would invite the detectives to begin their investigation, to track down maybe the source of that, and to talk with the family about what their wishes were. But it is important to preserve the image if we're going to do anything with it in court. So that's the best that I can say is have a good relationship with the Sheriff's Department, and I know that you do. I think Smith County High School and all of Smith County does very well with that. So just reach out to your Sheriff's Department and let them kind of take it from there. And I'll turn it over to Judge Bell, if you have anything to add there.
I really have nothing to add. If you called me and asked that question, I would have said you need to talk to your district attorney and turn it over to law enforcement.
Another question, Mr. Clover?
We have a question from someone not here watching online. They would like to know, do any of the panelists know any tricks kids are using to hide apps? And are there any apps out there that would help parents watch and control what their kids are doing on their phones?
I think Mr. Below.
Yes.
Did you?
I'm actually glad that was brought up because there's two apps that I've come across, both in different investigations. One of which led to a 32-count indictment of an individual in 15th for a variety of sexual offenses against 4 victims, spanning over 4 years. But so an app that was used in that case is an app called Hide It Pro, HIDITPRO. It's an encrypted app. You got to have the code to get into it. Kids or people can store images, videos, documents, whatever it is, can be stored in there. Now, I also found out that through that investigation, that application doesn't actually totally encrypt the data contained within it. What it does is it just kind of hides it within the algorithms of the hard drive of the phone. I know that because I ended up finding additional images and videos that this person stored in that app through the software that we use to extract cell phone data. Another app is, I don't know the name of it, but if you have an iPhone and you pull up your calculator app, you can download an app that looks just like that one. And you put in a specific number, whatever code digit it is, it could be 4 or 6. You put in that specific code, and it then unlocks it unlocks that application, and the person can store images, videos, documents, whichever, within that as well. So if you get your kid's phone and they have 2 calculator applications, one of those you should look into. As far as tracking, I don't necessarily know off the top of my head. I've got kids of my own, but they're 8, 6, and 4, and if they have a cell phone, I'm in trouble. So I don't know specifically as far as tracking apps. I know you can download ones where you can follow what they're doing, you can attach bank accounts to it as well, but I don't know what those are specifically off the top of my head.
A lot of the suspect cell phones that we'll look in, they'll use Snapchat most of the time. And in the Snapchat, you can dig further deep in it. It's got a My Eyes Only section, and it takes a different code just to get into that section. Also, there are hidden stories section on Snapchat that you could look in. And also scroll through the contacts. A lot of times it's not above suspects we look at to use a fake false name to hide a contact, and you start just because it says Frank Jones or whatever, you click on it and start reading the chat results, you find out pretty quickly, oh, that's a female, and chat going back and forth. So don't be afraid to dig deeper and watch just on the surface.
Mr. Smith, did you want to speak to that?
Now, to elaborate a little bit, Randy, on what you asked your parent, these guys have gave me a wealth of knowledge here tonight. I've been actually texting, probably should have been, to some of the staff for in-service, but we'd like to put together a list of things that we could pick your guys' brain, that we could hand out at in-service and then distribute to parents. So I hope that helped answer your questions.
see any other questions, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Glover. A couple of final things. Mr. Jenkins mentioned, and General Lawson can, if I'm wrong on this, can tell me, but he mentioned a Class D felony. If my memory serves me, that's 2 to 4 years as a Range 1 offender, and then a Class C felony, which is 3 to 6 years as a Range 1 offender, if my memory serves me. So these felony convictions carry with it some fairly serious potential imprisonment. And then finally, in the last 2 weeks, I've had my debit card attempted to be used in Minnesota at a Best Buy, a state I've never been to. And I've also received one of those phishing that Kit showed up there, and thankfully I didn't do it either, and I'm not on social media. So it's something that can happen. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Glover. Thank you.
One more thing.
Yes.
I want to specifically thank Mrs. Glover for putting most of this together and wish her happy birthday today.
Thank you.
Happy
That's
birthday
okay.
to everybody. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chris. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Thank you. I'm very embarrassed. It's really the lights. I have more hair and I've got redder than all of them. Okay. Just another special thank you to all of our guests for setting aside time in their busy schedules to be here tonight and share your expertise and knowledge with the rest of us. I would also like to thank all the principals and teachers for coming. Lastly, I want to thank a very special thank you to Smith County Insider for being here and covering this event so people could see this if they were not able to make it tonight. And then I have one more special shout out, and that goes to, he's not here, but Philip Slagle at TNT Market in Gordonsville. He has graciously donated our door prizes tonight. So if you were fortunate enough on your program to have a watermelon sticker in the top right corner, you have won a $25 gas card to Shell in Gordonsville. So you'll come see me in just a second. I will get that to you. So again, I appreciate all of you for being a part of this first of its kind event for Smith County, and I hope each of you have a good rest of your evening and a safe ride home. Thank you.